and we'll wait. Let me actually minimize this. This will take about 60 seconds. And what the trick here is that wasn't really GoToMeeting. What I did is I registered a domain called gotomeeting.us.com, which looks like it's really GoToMeeting, but it goes to one of my sites. And on my site, I host the payload for the WannaCry worm. So here we go. It's encrypting the files, and I got the pop-up. This is the real worm right here that's on this virtual machine. And it basically warns me that I have to make payment by such and such time. If I don't do it in 2 days and 23 hours, the price goes up. And if you don't do it in 6 days, you lose your files forever. So fortunately, these security researchers in France, maybe a little bit too late, one of these brilliant researchers realized when the victim's infected with WannaCry, you could extract the prime numbers that were used to create the RSA, which is an encryption, okay, RSA decryption key to actually decrypt the files. But that requires that the victim doesn't reboot their system, because then those keys are lost in memory. So now this machine's completely infected. If I take a look at it, we'll bring up what we call a Windows shell. We'll do a directory, and I'll enlarge this. Let me go to the desktop, actually. Whoops, it keeps popping up this annoying ransom thing. But if we take a look, we see these files with the WNCRY extension. Those files have been corrupted.
Yep.
Right, and those were originally normal working files.
This is the real infection here. So what are the 3 things that you recommend that companies do to prevent this from happening?
Well, as far as social engineering, security awareness and training, which everybody already knows, but I vigorously recommend, I actually work with Stu on this, is actually inoculating your employees and your contractors against these type of phishing attacks. And how do you inoculate? Kind of give it like the flu shot, and hopefully your body builds enough antibodies to fight off the real flu, is you actually attack your own employees. But I recommend that you don't attack them without giving them notice, because you don't want to reduce employee morale. You want to let them know they are tested time to time to improve the security of the business. And when they're tested, when they fall for these types of attacks, rather than getting something like WannaCry, what happens is it gives a splash screen, right, letting the employee or contractor know that they made a mistake, and that becomes a very teachable moment. So now we could train that user on, this is the type of attacks that are in the wild, and this is what you need to look out for. So over time, people become inoculated, in my mind. Now, is there someone that could still fall for it? Yes, but at least we reduce that percentage. Of course, you layer this with other type of technologies that hopefully detect implants and types of implants that attackers use in the wild. But unfortunately, again, we could bypass every PSP. Update your third-party software, not just your operating system, but like how I did the PDF exploit, I exploited a vulnerability in Adobe 11. And through an exploitation of this vulnerability, I was able to get what we call remote code execution, and was able to actually install my own software. So Adobe 11 had been patched. So what's important is all third-party software be patched on your users' desktops. How can you do this? There's a product out there, I think it's free, called Personal Software Inspector. And what it does, it looks for third-party apps, not your operating system, but Java, Adobe, messaging services like ADM and Trillion, these types of third-party apps, and make sure that you are keeping those up to date. Finally, firewall rules. Whenever an attacker puts an implant, whether it's in memory or on disk, of one of your users, guess what? That implant must communicate out to the internet to the attacker's C2 server. What's C2? Command and control server. So why is this successful? Because companies are really good, well, IT departments, at setting up firewall ingress rules. What's allowed into the company? Usually only port 80 and 443, which is just web services. But they don't do such a good job on egress rules. They allow too many services out. Say port 53, which is DNS, or SSH, or remote desktop, which is on port 3389. And then the implant can connect to the attacker C2 server over these ports. So it's important that your IT department reduce the amount of egress ports, and anything that's allowed out shall go through a web application proxy, because it makes it more difficult for the attacker. Is there implants out there that are proxy aware? Yes. But the whole idea here is we're trying to raise the bar and mitigate risk.
Very good. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Stu.
You bet.
Yeah.